Stay tuned till the end of the video if you want to know everything about hemolytic anemia, wherein what is the meaning of polychromasia, reticulocytosis, what is the NRBCs, what are the different pictures that you are getting in different kinds of hemolytic anemia. So if you don't want to miss any of this, please stay tuned till the end of the lecture. Hello and welcome back, students. Myself Dr. Gibran Ahmed presents to you Simply Pathology, and today we are going to start basics of hemolytic anemia. Now this is a new pattern and this is a new way of teaching that I have started, and hopefully you all will enjoy. So today we will discuss what hemolytic anemia is, and we are going to understand some basics of hemolytic anemia. So what are the things that we are going to read in today's lecture? Let me just highlight it. We are going to understand some basic features of hemolytic anemia. We are going to understand what is extravascular hemolysis and basic features of extravascular hemolysis. Then we are going to understand about intravascular hemolysis and its features. Okay. Then we are going to see and we are going to draw a comparison between extravascular hemolysis and intravascular hemolysis. Certain features which are common in all type of hemolytic anemia, whether it be EVH or IVH. There are certain features which are same in all types of hemolytic anemia. In the end, we are going to see certain special tests that we do, some special tests to detect the individual causes of hemolytic anemia. And along with that, we are also going to see certain peripheral blood smear pictures. Okay, certain pictures. So stay tuned till the end of the video if you wish to understand this topic very nicely. Okay. So having started this topic, let us try and understand very important things. So when we read about hemolytic anemia, we have to understand one important point. Okay, what is that important point? Now, any kind of hemolytic anemia has three important features. Okay, there are three important features of any hemolytic anemia. The first important feature of a hemolytic anemia is that the lifespan of RBC reduces. The lifespan of RBC reduces. So what is the normal lifespan of RBC? Normal lifespan is 120 days. So this is going to come down and become less than 120 days. Okay. So the first important feature of hemolytic anemia is reduced RBC lifespan. Let us see what is the second important feature of hemolytic anemia. Now, because RBCs are being destroyed and the level of RBCs are going down, so the body is thinking, that we are having less RBCs, so why not increase the production? So how does the body increase production of RBC? It increases the secretion of the hormone erythropoietin. Okay, so it increases the secretion of the hormone erythropoietin. Okay, now you all know the major source of erythropoietin in our body is the kidney. So they are basically stimulated to increase the secretion of erythropoietin. And what does it do? This increased erythropoietin is going to cause a compensatory increase in erythropoiesis, compensatory increase in the process of erythropoiesis. So because the RBCs are getting destroyed and the normal lifespan is reduced, so there is a drive to increase the amount of erythropoietin, leading to increased erythropoiesis. Okay, and the third very important feature of hemolytic anemia, if you see, is the accumulation of breakdown products of hemoglobin. Accumulation of breakdown products of hemoglobin. Okay, so as RBCs are going to be destroyed, what is going to happen? Yes, tell me. as RBCs are going to be destroyed, what is going to happen, that this particular hemoglobin is going to give rise to certain products. Okay, some of these products will enter the circulation. It is going to go into the circulation. Some of them will enter urine. Okay, will enter the urine. Okay, so what are the hemoglobin degradation products? There are many hemoglobin degradation products. Okay, for example, we are having bilirubin. Okay, now this excess hemoglobin might be converted into hemosiderin. Okay, so there are multiple breakdown products. So there are multiple biochemical parameters that we can test to to know about the breakdown products of hemolysis. Okay, breakdown products of hemoglobin. Okay, now let me just tell you one very important thing over here. Okay, now normally if you look at the normal RBC, what is the fate? What is the fate of a normal RBC? So let us see what is the fate of normal RBC. So normally an RBC, which is a biconcave in shape, okay, it lives its 120 days. Okay, and after it lives for 120 days, it is going to undergo phagocytosis. Okay, it undergoes phagocytosis, and this phagocytosis, it occurs in the mononuclear phagocyte system. So normally the RBCs are going to go and get phagocytosed after they have achieved or after they have lived their normal lifespan in the mononuclear phagocyte system. So you must be thinking that, sir, what is this MPS? This is nothing but the spleen, bone marrow and the liver. Okay, so the RBCs, after serving its normal lifespan, it is going to go to these sites and it is going to get degraded. Okay, and this degradation of the RBCs are carried out by certain phagocytes, that is the macrophages, which are present in the spleen, bone marrow and the liver. So over here it is this macrophage which is going to cause down. Okay, so this breakdown of the RBC, this is physiological. Okay, and it takes place at the end of 120 days and it is carried out by the macrophages present in the mononuclear phagocyte system. Now let us see the fate of RBC in case of hemolytic anemia. So what happens in case of hemolytic anemia? Let us try and understand. So in case of hemolytic anemia, so fate of RBCs in hemolytic anemia. In hemolytic anemia. So in case of hemolytic anemia, what happens? The first important thing that we have to understand, that there is a premature destruction of the RBC. So this RBC undergoes premature destruction. Okay, there is a premature destruction taking place. There is a premature destruction of the RBCs. Premature destruction of RBCs occurs. That means in less than 120 days the RBCs are getting destroyed. Okay, and this destruction again is taking place where? It is taking place in the mononuclear phagocyte system. Now because this mononuclear phagocyte system, it is outside the vessel, it is not in the vessel. So because the destruction is taking place in the spleen, liver, bone marrow, that is outside the vascular system. Okay, so such type of premature destruction is also called as extravascular hemolysis, EVH. I will just write it down. It is called as extravascular hemolysis, also called as EVH. Now try to understand one very important aspect. Now when there is, now our body is having a certain capacity for carrying out phagocytosis or destruction. Okay, so when this extravascular hemolysis is in excess, okay, or if it becomes persistent, if the extravascular hemolysis is in excess or if it becomes persistent, then what will happen? Then that means that if there is excessive destruction of the RBCs, that means more amount of phagocytes will be required for clearing or for carrying out phagocytosis of these RBCs. So this is going to lead to hyperplasia. It is going to lead to hyperplasia of phagocytes in the MPS. So this is going to lead to hepatosplenomegaly. This is going to lead to hepatosplenomegaly. Okay, hepatosplenomegaly. So when there is an excessive breakdown of the RBCs, okay, so all this site of breakdown of RBCs, that is the mononuclear phagocyte system, okay, this is going to undergo hyperplasia. There will be hyperplasia of the phagocytes, because naturally more amount of phagocytes will be required for clearing out the destroyed RBCs. So that is going to lead to hyperplasia, leading to hepatosplenomegaly. So this brings us to the first very important type of hemolysis, that is EVH. So splenomegaly is a very important feature of extravascular hemolysis, EVH. So with this, we are going to go to the next important page, that is your extravascular hemolysis. So I told you, now we will discuss in details about the extravascular hemolysis. Now first try to understand, out of both the types, okay, EVH versus IVH, extravascular hemolysis, it is the most common type. Okay, now extravascular hemolysis of the RBCs is occurring due to those causes which makes RBC less deformable, which makes the RBCs less deformable. Now what do you mean by this, less deformable? Try to understand that normally the shape of RBC, it is biconcave. Now this biconcave shape of the RBCs is providing more surface area, okay, more surface area and more flexibility. So this normal RBC, if you see normal RBC, okay, it is very flexible and it can easily maneuver through the spleen. It can easily go through the spleen or any kind of, spleen, liver, bone marrow. So the sinusoids of the spleen, the sinusoids of the liver, okay, they are very narrow. So RBCs, normal RBCs, okay, they can easily maneuver through the spleen and the liver. But in case of hemolytic anemia, certain cases of hemolytic anemia, for example, let us take the case of hereditary spherocytosis. In case of hereditary spherocytosis, for example, in this case, this normal RBC in hereditary spherocytosis becomes circular. It loses its biconcave shape. This is the normal biconcave shape. So in case of hereditary spherocytosis, in this condition, the RBC loses the biconcave shape. It becomes spherical. So now this particular RBC can no longer easily maneuver. It can no longer maneuver through the spleen or the liver. Okay, so as a liver, when such deformed RBCs, when they are going to enter the spleen and liver, they are going to get sequestered. They are going to get caught up. Okay, so they will not be able to pass easily, leading to its premature and increased destruction inside the spleen. Okay, so let me give you a fair bit of an idea. Over here, just let me write it down, what is happening. So whenever there is a reduced deformability of RBCs, so reduced deformability of the RBCs, as in certain hemolytic anemias, as I spoke about hereditary spherocytosis, okay, makes the passage of RBCs through the spleen, through the splenic sinusoids difficult. Okay, it makes this passage very difficult. So as a result, what is going to happen? There will be red cell sequestration. What is the meaning of sequestration? It is going to get trapped. Okay, there will be trapping of the red cells inside the spleen. And you know that once the RBCs are entrapped in the spleen is containing the phagocytes, the macrophages. So this is going to facilitate phagocytosis. It is going to facilitate the phagocytosis by the macrophages. which is located in by the macrophages which are located in the splenic sinusoids, splenic cords or sinusoids. Okay, so the major clinical feature, so what is the major clinical feature? Let us see what is the major clinical feature of extravascular hemolysis. So yes, you all can comment in the comment section and tell me now. So what is the major clinical feature in extravascular hemolysis? Remember, very importantly, the most important feature over here, because there is an extravascular, means outside the vessels there is hemolysis. So the hemolysis will take place in the mononuclear phagocyte system, that is the spleen, liver, bone marrow. So there will be splenomegaly and hepatomegaly. Why splenomegaly as well as hepatomegaly occurs? But there are two reasons. One reason we have already seen is your hyperplasia of phagocytes. Okay, so there is hyperplasia of phagocytes which is taking place. Okay, this is one reason that we have seen, hyperplasia of phagocytes. The second important point that why hepatosplenomegaly occurs. Now remember, whenever anemia will become very severe, hemolytic anemia in case of extravascular hemolysis, if it is persistent and severe, there will be, the body will start to produce the blood cells outside the bone marrow, and that is called as extramedullary hematopoiesis. That is, the blood cell formation or hematopoiesis will start to occur outside the bone marrow. That is why we are using the term extramedullary hematopoiesis. Then there will be other features of anemia. Now this is not very exclusive feature. It is there in IVH also. So anemia, jaundice and other features which is there, which will be there. But this is the most important and exclusive feature is your hepatosplenomegaly, which is seen classically in extravascular hemolysis. So just to revise, if you see extravascular hemolysis, it is the more common variety of hemolysis in between EVH and IVH, and it occurs because of causes which makes the RBC less deformable or which makes the RBC lose its normal biconcave shape, which is going to lead, now such deformed RBCs, when they enter the splenic sinusoid, they are going to get trapped, and because they are going to stay longer, so there is an increased risk of phagocytosis. So the chances of phagocytosis will increase, and ultimately because of, if the extravascular hemolysis is persistent, it is going to lead to hepatosplenomegaly. Why? Because of hyperplasia of phagocytes as well as extramedullary hematopoiesis. Okay, so I hope these points are clear to you. Let us now go to the next topic of discussion, that is intravascular hemolysis. So let us see what intravascular hemolysis is. Okay, now first of all, I will try to give you some of the basic causes of intravascular hemolysis. So what are the basic causes? So any cause. Okay, first of all, try to understand what IVH is. IVH means whenever there is a destruction of the RBCs taking place inside a blood vessel. So if this is a blood vessel, okay, if this is a blood vessel, over here the RBCs are getting destroyed, okay, within the circulation. Okay, so they are getting broken down inside the blood vessels, whereas in case of IVH, whereas in case of extravascular hemolysis, the destruction was taking place in the MPS, that is in the spleen, liver and bone marrow. But over here the destruction is taking place inside the bone marrow. Okay, so this is the site. So first of all, let us try and understand what are the basic causes. What are the basic causes of intravascular hemolysis? And remember, this is less common as compared to IVH. This is less common as compared to IVH. So let us see over here what are the causes of intravascular hemolysis. So the causes are, number one, whenever there is any kind of mechanical injury to the RBC. Mechanical injury is there to the RBC. So what do we understand by this? Let us see. So suppose the RBC is getting traumatized. Okay, for example, there is trauma by the cardiac valves. Okay, so the cardiac valves are pathological, deformed, or there is some mechanical cardiac valve that has been placed. It can cause destruction of RBCs, or there is a thrombotic narrowing of the vessels, as in case of atherosclerosis. Okay, as in case of different kinds, as in case of sickle cell anemia, where you have a thrombotic narrowing of microcirculation. Okay, this will lead to destruction of the RBCs within the blood vessels. Or in case of marathon running or bongo drumming. Marathon running, so when Indian soldiers or soldiers anywhere in the world, they have to run a lot, they have every day they are having some kind of exercise, so in those conditions they might suffer from this. Okay, or there is a bongo drumming, so prolonged bongo drumming can also lead to this. So the basic thing is, the first funda over here is there is a direct mechanical trauma to the RBC leading to this. Okay, second condition can be in case there is a complement fixation. So there are two conditions over here. Okay, there are two conditions over here that we will see. One is your paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, and other condition is paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria. Okay, PCH and PNH are two hemolytic anemia conditions which is associated with intravascular hemolysis. Third is, in certain kinds of malaria, that is falciparum malaria. In falciparum malaria also there is intravascular hemolysis. Falciparum malaria. Okay. Fourth is sometimes we are having some kinds of bacterial sepsis like Clostridial sepsis. Okay, it releases certain enzymes which can digest the RBC membrane easily. Okay, and last but not the least, the most important is mismatched blood transfusion or blood transfusion reactions. Okay, so in case you have given a wrong blood group to a patient, then there will be intravascular hemolysis. Actually, if you say, this is the most relevant example of intravascular hemolysis. Now we are going to try and understand one important thing, that what are the clinical features of intravascular hemolysis. Okay, so now as I told you one important fact over here. Let us see what is the fact. चलो देखते हैं. Now as I told you कि in intravascular hemolysis, this is the blood vessel. Okay, so whatever RBC is there, it is broken down over here in the blood vessel only na. So once the RBCs are getting broken down in the blood vessels, what will happen? So what are the very important exclusive clinical features? So whatever hemoglobin was there inside the RBC, it will be released inside the circulation, yes or no? So there is what is called as hemoglobinemia, the meaning of which is that the hemoglobin is now present in the circulation. Now this same hemoglobin from the circulation, it is going to go into the kidneys. So if it goes into the kidney, it is also going to come out in the urine. So there will be hemoglobinuria, yes or no? There will be hemoglobinuria. Okay, then once the hemoglobin enters the kidney, some amount is also going to be reabsorbed into the tubules. Yes or no? They will be reabsorbed inside the tubules, and inside the tubules, this excess amount of hemoglobin is going to get converted into a storage form that is called as hemosiderin. That is hemosiderin. And this hemosiderin, okay, once this, because all the tubular cells also have a lifespan, so when their normal lifespan will be completed, these tubular cells will be shed off, and along with that, this hemosiderin will also be shed off. Yes or no? So there is something called as hemosiderin-urea. So these are the three very important features that we see in case of IVH. Now along with that, certain non-specific features will be there, like anemia, jaundice, which was also there in case of. So these are very non-specific features which is present in any type of hemolytic anemia. Okay, but one very important aspect that we have to keep in mind over here is that over here there is no splenomegaly. No splenomegaly is seen in case of IVH. So unlike in IVH, we were having splenomegaly, but over here we do not have. This is the most important point that you have to keep in mind when we are trying to when we are trying to differentiate. Okay, now let me just show you what is happening. One very important thing is, Now remember one very important aspect I am going to tell you. Whenever, for example, if this is the blood vessel, okay, and if this is the RBC and this hemoglobin is released, so once the hemoglobin is released in the circulation, remember, it cannot remain, this cannot remain in free form, okay, it cannot remain in the free form. So what will happen over here? This hemoglobin is going to bind to a plasma protein that we call it as, this hemoglobin will bind to a protein that is called as haptoglobin, okay, and they will form what is called as hemoglobin haptoglobin complex, okay. So one very important feature is when the amount of hemoglobin released in the circulation is very high, the serum levels of haptoglobin is going to go down. So reduced serum level of haptoglobin is an important clinical feature of hemolytic anemia, especially in case of intravascular hemolysis. Now having said that, I will say one important thing. Now mainly hemoglobin is released in the circulation only in case of IVH, but also you have to understand that some amount of hemoglobin, very less, around 0.001% hemoglobin is released into the circulation in case of extravascular hemolysis as well, okay, and because of which some amount of haptoglobin is also utilized in case of EVA. So there is a fall in the level of haptoglobin also in case of EVH, but not to that extent that is seen in case of IVH, okay. So let us see some of these important features, what is happening over here in case of IVH, okay. So this hemoglobin haptoglobin complex, okay, once it enters the circulation, what is happening, let us see, okay. They are basically cleared by the mononuclear phagocytes. So let us see some of the important features in IVH. So what is happening? The first important thing is, first thing that we see that there is a depletion. There is a depletion of serum haptoglobin, and the depletion is far more as compared to EVH. In EVH also there is depletion, but not that much. Now remember, free hemoglobin, some amount of free hemoglobin, they also get converted to what is called as methemoglobin, okay, which is brown in color. And this methemoglobin is classically only formed in case of IVH. This methemoglobin is going to combine with albumin and is going to form what is known as methalbumin. And there is a special test that is done to detect this methalbumin, that is called as Shum's test, which is a very important MCQ, okay. This is with regards to intravascular hemolysis that we are speaking about. Now the second important, let me take a different color pen so that it becomes easier to understand. Now the second important feature is, as I told you, this hemoglobin along with methemoglobin, as I have already explained, they are going to get absorbed by the proximal tubular cells, okay. They are going to go into the kidneys, okay. In the kidneys, some amount is going to pass in the urine, leading to what is called as hemoglobinuria, okay, whereas some amount of this hemoglobin is going to get reabsorbed into the tubules, and later on once that tubular cell is going to be shed off, so the hemosiderin that was stored is also going to come out. So there is hemosideриnuria, okay. Now because hemoglobin is containing iron, and excessive amount of, if there is excessive amount of intravascular hemolysis, so more amount of hemoglobin is going to get reabsorbed into the tubular cells of the kidney, okay, and more amount will be converted into hemosiderin, okay. So it can lead to, excessive hemosiderin deposition can lead to what is called as renal hemosiderosis, Okay. And last point over here is that once this hemoglobin, this haptoglobin hemoglobin complex is being cleared by the mononuclear phagocyte system, what will happen? This mononuclear phagocyte system is going to break this hemoglobin into bilirubin, and this bilirubin, once it will come into circulation and will give rise to jaundice. Okay. So this is the basic fate, what happens to the intravascular hemoglobin. Okay, once intravascular hemolysis occurs, what happens? So just let me repeat it once more for you all. IVH is a far less common cause of hemolysis compared to EVH, with multiple causes like mechanical trauma, complement fixation, malaria, clostridial sepsis, and mismatched blood transfusion. The most important clinical feature which separates IVH from other forms of hemolytic anemia is hemoglobinemia, hemoglobinuria, hemosideruria. Okay. Now remember, very importantly, there is no splenomegaly unlike EVH. Now remember, once it comes into the circulation, we have to understand that it cannot remain free. So it is going to bind with a serum plasma protein called as haptoglobin and will give rise to a hemoglobin haptoglobin complex, which is then cleared by the mononuclear phagocytes. Now remember, the first important aspect of IVH is that there will be an excessive fall of serum haptoglobin levels. The free hemoglobin can also give rise to methemoglobin, ultimately forming methalbumin, which is detected by Shum's test. And as I told you, some amount of hemoglobin will go into the kidney and directly it will pass unchanged as hemoglobinuria, and some amount of hemoglobin is going to be absorbed by the proximal tubular cells, and after they have lived their lifespan, these cells will be shed off, giving rise to hemosideruria. Now excessive absorption and conversion into hemosiderin can give rise to renal hemosiderosis, and ultimately this hemoglobin can be broken into bilirubin and can give rise to jaundice. Okay, so these were the classical features of intravascular hemolysis. Now let us see, let us differentiate now, as we have read now both the conditions. Now we are going to differentiate between IVH and EVH. So now you are going to tell me how we differentiate each of them. Okay. So the site of hemolysis in case of IVH, it occurs within the circulation. Okay. Whereas EVH, if we see, it occurs in the macrophage. It occurs in the macrophage of MPS, mononuclear phagocyte system, that is the spleen, liver, bone marrow. So splenomegaly will be present? No, they will be absent in case of IVH, whereas they are present in case of EVH. So hemoglobinuria, hemosideruria, and your hemoglobinemia, all these three conditions, they are present over here in case of IVH, whereas they will be absent in case of EVH. Okay. Now remember one thing, this hemoglobin in the circulation is present in increased amounts in case of IVH, whereas it is present but in very, very less amount. In very less amount it is present in case of EVH. So the Shum's test is positive only in case of IVH. So it is a differentiating test, whereas it is absent in case of EVH. Now the retic count, remember retic count is a measure of erythropoiesis. So whether it be IVH or whether it be EVH, retic count is going to be raised in any kind of hemolytic anemia. So it is a common feature. Now remember, in hemolytic anemia, basically unconjugated or indirect bilirubin levels rise. So unconjugated or indirect levels is going to rise in both EVH as well as IVH. Now serum haptoglobin levels are going to decrease in both conditions, but the decrease will be far more in case of IVH as compared to EVH. And serum LDH levels are going to be raised in any kind of hemolytic anemia. So in both conditions, they are going to be raised. So this is all about IVH, EVH with its important features. Now, there are certain features which are common in all types of hemolytic anemia. So what are those features? Let us see. So features which are common to all types of hemolytic anemia. Let us see those. There are certain lab features. There are certain tests that we do in the laboratory, and these features are common to all types of hemolytic anemia, whether it be EVH or whether it be IVH. So what is the importance of this slide? So in the exam, if you get any question with regards to any hemolytic anemia, maximally it is a chance that it is a case of EVH only. Okay, it's a case of EVH only. So it is not that much, difficult to write. So even if you write these features, you are going to get right, you are going to get marks. Okay. So what are the features which are common to both EVH and IVH? Let us see. Number one, as I told you, there will be increase. So we will first discuss the laboratory features. Okay. So there will be increased amount of unconjugated serum bilirubin. Okay. Which is your indirect bilirubin. Second important thing over here is that there will be an increased amount of serum LDH. Thirdly, decreased serum haptoglobin. And fourth important feature is increased urobilinogen in urine. So all these features, these are laboratory features of increased red cell destruction. So all this features is indicating excessive destruction of the RBCs. Okay. Now once if destruction is there, the body will try to compensate also. So there will be increased erythropoiesis as well. Yes or no? So basically we are going to see what are the features of excessive erythropoiesis. Let us see. Okay. What are the features of excessive erythropoiesis? Laboratory features of accelerated or increased RBC synthesis or erythropoiesis. Let us see. Number one parameter is there will be increased retic count called as reticulocytosis. Okay. Number two feature, very important, in the peripheral blood smear, you are going to see polychromasia. You are going to see polychromasia. What is polychromasia? Polychromasia, I will just show you. Just let me write it down. I will show you with the help of image so you will understand better. Increased amount of nucleated RBCs. There will be anisopoikilocytosis. Anisocytosis means difference in the RBC size. Poikilocytosis means differences in the RBC shape. Anisopoikilocytosis means difference in the RBC size and shape. Certain target cells you will see. And you will see fragmented RBCs or broken down RBCs. Fragmented RBCs in the PBS, that is also called as cystocytes. So we are just going to see that image. And lastly, we are having in the bone marrow is going to show erythroid hyperplasia. Erythroid hyperplasia. Okay. We will go on to see all the pictures. Okay, but before that, just one last point, then I will finish this particular slide. So basic important thing over here that I want to say is that clinically how will a patient of hemolytic anemia present? So some common features, they will have anemia. So they will be presenting with pallor. There will be mild jaundice. Along with that, there will be formation of pigment gallstones. And why this pigment gallstones form? Anyone has any idea? Please comment in the comment section and tell me. Because of increased bilirubin excretion into the biliary tract. And where is this bilirubin coming from? From excessive breakdown of the RBCs. So as I promised you, I will now take you into, I will show different kinds of pictures now, as I promised you. Okay. So this is a very, very important part to understand, because in MBBS, in practicals, you will be given certain slide according to the latest guidelines of the NMC. Okay, you will be more practical based. Now, what does polychromasia means? Means multiple coloring. Let me just give you a fair bit of an idea over here so you understand. Can you see this RBC over here? This is the normal RBC with a normal pallor and has a normal color. Okay, pinkish red color. Can you see this RBC? This is little bit bluish. So there is multiple colors over here. Some of them are blue, some of them are normal colored. If you see this, they are bluish in color. Okay, this is called as polychromasia. This is called as polychromasia, and polychromasia is a basic sign of hemolysis. It is a basic sign of hemolysis. Okay, so very important is polychromasia. It's a generalized sign of hemolytic anemia. Now, why it is bluish in color? What is the reason? Now, because there is a compensatory erythropoiesis. So excessive amount of erythropoiesis is, RBCs are getting synthesized. So what happens? Excessive amount of immature RBCs enter the circulation containing remnants of the nuclear material, and this nuclear material is taking up this stain, bluish color, giving rise to this polychromasia. Now let me just show you one other slide. Now, how do you highlight? Now, the amount of, as I told you, there is reticulocytosis, increased retic count, and this is basically, this stain is a supravital stain. Supravital stain. What are the supravital stain? Please tell me in the comment section, everyone. Okay, one is new methylene blue and brilliant cressyl blue. Okay, so this is a supravital stain which is highlighting the reticulocytes, the levels of which are increased in case of hemolytic anemia. Okay, now very important, another basic thing is that there is a nucleated presence of nucleated RBCs. Okay, so the presence of this nucleated RBCs, also called as NRBCs, is indicating that there is an increased compensatory erythropoiesis, indicating that there is some sort of RBC destruction going on. Now, very important in the slide, see, there is polychromasia also. There are certain RBCs which are polychromatic. Now, why we are saying that these are NRBCs only? See, normally if you see, this is normal size of the RBC corresponds to the size of the nucleus of the small lymphocyte. Okay, and if you see the nucleus of the NRBCs or nuclear RBCs, they are far more condensed. They are much smaller than size of the nucleus of small lymphocyte. They are having a rim of cytoplasm, and the nucleus is pycnotic. They are pycnotic. This is how you are going to identify NRBCs in the peripheral blood smear. Okay, now these are some of the basic. Okay, now these are some other findings. Okay, this is classical presence of target cells. Again, this is very non-specific sign, but it is presence of target cells. Again, it is indicative of hemolytic anemia or hemolysis. These are the classical target cells that we see. And very important, the presence of teardrop cells. These are pear-shaped cells that you see. These are also classically seen in case of hemolytic anemia. Okay, hemolytic anemia. And one very important thing, let me just show you. Let me just go. I will come to this other points later on. Yes, anisopoikilocytosis. Now, can you appreciate over here? One of the RBC is bigger, one is a small. So there is difference in the size of RBCs. This is called as anisocytosis. Anisocytosis, and there is something called as poikilocytosis, where the shape changes. Okay, the shape changes. Change in shape is called as poikilocytosis. Okay, this is basically your change in RBC shape. Okay, so anisopoikilocytosis, presence of teardrop cells, target cells, okay, teardrop cells, target cells, all these are basic signs. So whatever I showed you right now, polychromasia, reticulocytosis, NRBCs, nucleated RBCs I showed you, then I showed you target cells, teardrop cells, okay, and then I showed you anisopoikilocytosis. All these are non-specific signs of hemolytic anemia. This is how the peripheral blood picture is presenting in case of hemolytic anemia. Is this point, I hope this point is now clear to everyone. Okay, now I am going to discuss some of the special tests, and before I discuss the special test, let me just give you the causes of EVH and IVH that I just forgot to mention you. So one of the last thing that I forgot to mention over here are the causes. What are the causes of IVH and EVH? So the causes of IVH we have already seen. So the basic causes of IVH, let me just give it down. So as we saw, any cause where there is a mechanical trauma to the RBC, okay, these are the causes of IVH. Okay, then falciparum malaria, as we saw, falciparum malaria. Then we had seen about two important causes, PNH and PCH, paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria and paroxysmal cold hemoglobinuria. Okay, then hemolytic transfusion reaction, mismatched blood transfusion, hemolytic transfusion reaction. Okay, these are some of the important causes of intravascular hemolysis. Similarly, now remember, this is far less common. This is less common as compared to extravascular hemolysis, whereas extravascular hemolysis, if you see, it is far more common. Extravascular hemolysis is far more common. So what are the basic causes? So hemoglobinopathies, okay. For example, you are having sickle cell anemia, okay, HBS, or you are having HBC, or you are having HBD, some other types of hemoglobin structural abnormalities is there. Sometimes you will have hereditary hemolytic anemia. Very important is thalassemia, hereditary hemolytic anemia. Like you are having thalassemia, or you are having hereditary spherocytosis, or you might have G6PD deficiency. Okay, so as I told you, this is far more common. So in the exam, it is more likely that you will get a EVH for your question than you will get an IVH. Okay, for example, autoimmune hemolytic anemia. These are all causes of extravascular hemolysis. Now we are going to go to certain special test, okay, to find out the root cause of hemolysis. We are going to do certain special test. I mean, I am going to show you diagrams as well for the test. So let us see certain special tests that we will do. Okay, certain special test. So the first test, from the peripheral blood smear we can get a lot of answers. Okay, so in the PBS, if we see the presence of sickle cells, okay, then it is indicative of presence of sickle cell disorder. Okay, or for example, if you see the presence of spherocytes, okay, that is round RBCs, small condensed round RBCs, they are seen in case of hereditary spherocytosis, autoimmune hemolytic anemia, ABO hemolytic disease of newborn, as well as in case of G6PD deficiency, you can see spherocytes. Okay, now sometimes you will see presence of cystocytes. Okay, so cystocytes are classically, if you see, the cystocytes are seen in microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, also called as MAHA. And what are these conditions? These are TTP, HUS, hemolytic uremic syndrome, and disseminated intravascular coagulation. Okay, so TTP stands for thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, HUS stands for hemolytic uremic syndrome, and DIC stands for disseminated intravascular coagulation. In the peripheral blood smear, you can see the presence of Bite cells, which is indicative of G6PD deficiency. I will show you the individual images, don't worry. Okay, now you can see microcytic anemia, okay, hypochromic cells, microcytic hypochromic cells. Along with that, you will see target cells and features of hemolysis. Okay, then it is pointing up, it's a pointer towards thalassemia, and lastly you might see pancytopenia. In case of pancytopenia, you might observe pancytopenia is seen in only one type of hemolytic anemia, that is PNH, or paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. So let me just justify my answers with the help of pictures. So I have shown you certain pictures, but not all of them. So let me give you an example. So for example, if you see over here, this is a normal RBC, if you see, with has a central 1/3 pallor. Now if you see, in case of hereditary spherocytosis, if you see the RBCs, they become smaller, they will lose the biconcave shape, they become spherical. So these are small and there is no central pallor, and these RBCs, they show increased MCHC. Okay, they show increased MCHC. Okay, and they are small. Okay, so these are seen classically in hereditary spherocytosis. Okay. Now if you can see, these are bite cells. They are called bite cells because it is as if someone has taken a bite of this RBC. Okay, more in details we will read about them when I will teach you G6PD deficiency. This is classically seen in case of G6PD deficiency. Okay. Okay, target cells, as I already told you, it is very non-specific, but it is seen in case of it is seen in case of thalassemia mainly. Okay, let me show you. If you can see over here, there are certain RBCs over here which have been irreversibly sickled. Sickle means some shape like a sickle like this. Okay, and these sickle cells are classically seen in sickle cell disease or sickle cell anemia. Okay, let me show you more. Yes, if you see, these are helmet cells. These are fragmented, broken RBCs. Okay, they are classically a feature of microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, namely thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura, hemolytic uremic syndrome, and DIC. So this is all about. So now I hope you must have understood how peripheral blood smear is allowing us not to identify hemolytic anemia, but also the cause of hemolytic anemia. Okay. Now we are going to go to certain special test. Okay, certain more special test, and then we are going to end this particular video. Now the second special test that we can do over here is the test to detect hereditary hemolytic anemia. Which test are you going to do to detect hereditary hemolytic anemia? For example, sickle cell anemia. Okay, like that. So it is done for hemoglobin disorders. Okay, so which test is done? For example, one test is sickling test. Now details of all these tests will be discussed, okay, when we do the individual hemolytic anemia chapters. Okay, hemoglobin electrophoresis, HPLC, HbA2 estimation is to be done, HbF estimation, okay, and the presence of red cell inclusions can be seen. So any kind of hemoglobin disorder, if it is suspected, these are the tests that we will have to do, and this is in case of hereditary hemolytic anemia. Second is, there can be defect at the level of red cell enzyme. Now as you have guessed it right, red cell enzyme defect is seen in G6PD deficiency, so you have to do certain test for G6PD deficiency. And then there might be red cell membrane or RBC membrane disorder might be there. RBC membrane disorder is classically seen in hereditary spherocytosis, for which we have a special screening test called as osmotic fragility test. For hereditary spherocytosis, we do osmotic fragility test we do in case of hereditary spherocytosis. Okay, so this were the special test which is done to detect hereditary hemolytic anemia. And lastly we are going to see the third is the test which is done to detect acquired hemolytic anemia. So which test are you going to do to detect acquired hemolytic anemia? Now again, for immune hemolytic anemia, there is some special test. For immune hemolytic anemia, if you see, we are going to do very commonly known as the Coombs test, also called as antiglobulin test. And other acquired condition is your PNH, that is paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. For this we are having different tests. One is your sucrose hemolysis test. Then you are having Ham's acidified serum lysis test. And lastly we are having flow cytometric analysis. Flow cytometric analysis. Okay. So with this we have completed the basics of hemolytic anemia, and I hope you have understood about it in details. If you have any doubts, you are free to comment in the comment section. And this is a very important lecture, and I hope you have understood this lecture well. Please do share with other students as well if you find this lecture useful. So thank you very much for watching this video.